me show you something that most landlords never get to experience. You see, a tenant just moved out of my rental unit, and the place, well, it looks better than when I moved in. I'm talking no damage, no weird smells, no surprise repairs, just clean, thoughtful, and cared for. But here's the thing, this isn't normal for most landlords, and no, I promise you it's not luck. You see, most landlords are stuck in this cycle of constant stress, turnover, and expensive fixes. So in this video, I actually wanted to show you how I broke that cycle and the counterintuitive strategy that I use to consistently attract great tenants, even if it means leaving a little bit of money on the table up front. Now, just so you know, I mean, this isn't some out-of-state rental that I never visit. It's literally the downstairs unit in my very own home. So when I rent this place out, I mean, I'm not just choosing a tenant, I'm choosing a literal neighbor, somebody who's going to be living within the same premises of me. And that actually gives me a ton of major advantages that most landlords, well, they just don't talk about. I can actually be more selective with who goes into that unit. As an owner-occupant, you are legally allowed to be more careful, especially for things that directly affect your own personal quality of life, like noise, smoking, or pets. And if you live in a duplex or a triplex with 4 units or fewer, fair housing rules make room for that. So I'm not just optimizing for income, I'm optimizing for peace of mind, to have shared walls, and for the actual vibe of my overall home and living situation. So let's talk about how this last tenant turnover went. You see, the tenant moved out after living there for a full year, and they left behind spotless floors, labeled cabinets, and an even better shower head than the one that I originally installed. I mean, they added thoughtful touches, they cleaned up thoroughly, and they even called out a tiny paint chip about the size of my fingernail. I mean, that's the kind of experience landlords dream of, and it's happened multiple times now. Not because I'm lucky, but because of the system that I built around how I price and screen for tenants. And when that tenant brought up that paint chip, it was really eye-opening to me because it just shows how, nervous that some of these tenants might potentially be based off previous experiences that they've had with landlords, dinging them for random expenses that really make no sense. I mean, it just is pretty eye-opening to see the hesitation around some of the stuff like that. As I've had a couple tenants move out, like some of the stuff that they've pointed out, it's like no big deal items that I guess in the past they've been dinged for time and time again. But here's where everything gets a little bit counterintuitive. You see, I don't actually list my unit near or at the top of the market. I actually list it just slightly under. I mean, I'm not hundreds of dollars below, but just enough to stand out. Now, you'd think that charging more would actually get you a better tenant pool because they're probably making more money and can potentially afford more, right? But in reality, I've found that pricing it too high is how I've ended up with extended vacancies or people who are financially stretched really thin. And missing 1 month's rent because I've overpriced the unit, well, that wipes out an entire year of gains that I would have made from charging $100 more just for each month. I mean, it's not going to be that big of a difference in the long run. So 1 month empty, that's all gone. Meanwhile, renting it at a more reasonable rate gets you faster applications, better options, and tenants who are more invested in keeping to the place long term. Now, when your place is just slightly under the market, you stop being just another listing. You're actually a great deal. And the people that I want seeking out my units are people that are potentially looking for great deals and want to better their own living situation. So for example, the past 2 tenants I've had, I've really felt like they've been trying to leverage up into buying a new property. And so in order to do that, they were looking for a good deal on the market. And that's what they found with the unit that I was offering at the time. And it's super cool because now you've got dozens of qualified applicants instead of just 2 random applicants that you're picking and choosing from. And you get to choose somebody who actually wants to be there. Now, people who say, I don't want to lose this unit. And I mean, that mindset shift, it changes how they treat the space because these tenants, they tend to stay longer, they communicate much better, and they leave the property cleaner than how they had found it. And that's not a coincidence. It's actually incentive alignment, in my opinion. But here's the thing. I mean, price isn't the only factor. You still have to screen really well. I mean, personally, I look for thoughtful communication, stable income, and strong references. But the biggest red flag is how they talk about their landlord. If they're quick to throw them under the bus or act like nothing was ever their fault, I mean, I'm completely out at that point. Because the biggest predictor of how somebody's going to treat your place is how they actually treated the last place. The other thing as part of my screening process, what I like to do is ask a couple questions before sending out the rental applications. It kind of helps me weed out to see if there's a good fit, but at the same time, it shows who's actually reading the full listing. Because a lot of people will just shoot out applications and they're just blindly looking at trying to find a place to live, and it's not necessarily their priority. So if I realize that somebody skipped a step and they haven't answered the questions that are in the listing, I mean, I know that they're probably not going to follow the rules when they move in, and it could potentially be a pretty ugly situation. Now, at the end of the day, I mean, could I charge more? Sure. I could probably bump the rent by $150 to $200 per month, but what would that really get me? Honestly, it would get me more turnover, more vacancy, and more stress, especially since I live right upstairs. And when you do the math, it doesn't really add up. A full year of peace and consistent rent is worth far more than an extra $1,000 that gets wiped out the second your unit sits vacant or a bad tenant damages something. What looks like a discount on paper, it actually ends up being a profit in practice. Now, the other thing that I feel like I do a little bit differently than most landlords or slumlords, if you will, that I feel like people run into is I genuinely look at these places and I figure out if I would actually rent them if I was just some random person looking for an apartment. So in this particular unit, one thing that we added because we were getting the wrong tenant pool, wasn't enough applications, things like that, it didn't have in-unit washer and dryer. That's huge for this area, and not a ton of other places actually offer that. So it actually bumps up the value of this listing, and it would actually be something that I would be, willing to go and live in at that point. There's a couple different things that I actually want to add to this unit over time, but it hasn't necessarily detracted from the tenant pool just yet, so we'll see what happens. Now, there's also a part of me that wants to turn this space into a YouTube studio, and maybe someday I will, but for now, with some big expenses on the horizon, I mean, it makes more sense to keep it rented. I mean, I'm proud of this place. I gutted it, I rebuilt it, and I designed it with intention. So when somebody else walks in and treats it like their home, I mean, that means way more than me than just a couple extra $100 a month. So listen, if you're house hacking or even renting out your first place, don't fall to the trap of chasing max rent and following the dollar signs. That mindset leads to, in my opinion, high turnover, high stress, and low returns. Instead, just chase consistency. Chase that peace of mind, and if you're living in the property, use that to your advantage. You want to make the lives of those in your property just as good as yours, because trust me, you don't want that tenant knocking on your door at all hours of the day. Screen intentionally, price strategically, and build a system that actually works for you. Now, I'm genuinely curious, what are your thoughts on this pricing approach for a unit? Does it make sense? Do you think I'm being stupid for this? Am I leaving too much money on the table? I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to learn this stuff as I go along, but this seems to have worked for me. So anyways, guys, thanks for checking out this video. If you want to see the nightmare renovation that I went through on this property, definitely check out this video right here. It is a doozy, and it's still giving me heartburn to this day. So thanks for checking out this video, and have a great day.